The stranger stumbled into Hamilton, Nevada on a Tuesday morning in late April of 1878, her dress torn and dusty, her face gaunt from hunger, and desperation burning in her eyes like the desert sun overhead. Quinton Blake had just finished mucking out the horse stalls when he heard the creak of his gate. He straightened, wiping the sweat from his brow with his forearm, and turned to see a woman who looked like she had walked through hell itself. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes held a wildness that spoke of survival against all odds. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, he guessed, and everything about her posture screamed exhaustion. "Help you, miss?" Quinton called out, setting his pitchfork against the barn wall. He was 26, tall and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes the color of Tennessee whiskey. His ranch sat on the outskirts of Hamilton, a silver mining town that had boomed and was now settling into something more permanent. The woman took a hesitant step forward, her hand gripping the weathered fence post for support. "I don't mean to trouble you, mister. I need a place to stay. Just for a little while until I can figure out what to do next." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the pride that kept her chin lifted. "I can work. I'm good with animals and I can cook and clean. I don't need much. Just a corner of your barn, somewhere dry where I can lay my head at night." Quinton studied her carefully. He had seen plenty of desperate people pass through Nevada, especially since the mining boom brought all sorts to these parts. But there was something different about this woman, something in the way she held herself despite her obvious exhaustion that caught his attention. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone gentler now. "Nora Walsh," she replied, meeting his gaze directly despite the vulnerability of her position. "Well, Miss Walsh, I'm Quinton Blake. This here is my ranch." He gestured to the land around them, the barn behind him, and the house that sat about 50 yards away. It wasn't the biggest spread in Nevada, but it was his, earned through years of hard work and careful saving. "And I'm not about to let any woman sleep in my barn like livestock. You'll stay in the house." Nora's eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "No, I couldn't possibly. I just need somewhere temporary, and I don't want to impose on your hospitality or your—" "Well, if you have a wife, I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate a strange woman in her home." "No wife," Quinton said simply. "No family at all anymore. My parents passed from fever 3 years back, and my sister married and moved to California. It's just me and the ranch hands, and they bunk in the quarters out by the east pasture. The house is more than big enough, and there's a spare room that hasn't been used in ages. You'll stay there, at least until you get your strength back and figure out your next move." Nora looked like she wanted to argue, but her body swayed slightly, and Quinton moved forward instinctively, catching her elbow to steady her. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her dress hung loose on her frame, and the small cuts and bruises that marked her exposed skin. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. She hesitated, then admitted quietly, "2 days ago, maybe 3. I've been walking for a while." Quinton made his decision immediately. "Come on. Let's get you fed first, then you can clean up and rest. We'll talk about everything else later." He guided her toward the house, noting how she tried to keep some distance between them despite her exhaustion. The main house was a solid structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that provided shade during the brutal summer months. Inside, it was cool and surprisingly well kept for a bachelor's home. Quinton led her to the kitchen and pulled out a chair. "Sit," he instructed, already moving to the stove. "I've got some stew left from last night. It won't take but a minute to warm up." Nora sank into the chair gratefully, her hands folded in her lap. She watched him move around the kitchen with an efficiency that spoke of years of cooking for himself. Within minutes, he had placed a bowl of hearty beef stew in front of her, along with fresh bread and a glass of cool water from the pump. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she ate with the careful control of someone trying not to appear too desperate, though Quinton could see her hunger in every movement. He sat across from her with his own cup of coffee, giving her space but staying close enough to help if she needed it. "You don't have to tell me your story if you don't want to," he said after a while, "but I'd like to know what brought you to my gate looking like you've been through a war." Nora finished chewing slowly, then took a sip of water. When she spoke, her voice was steady but tinged with old pain. "I was married. My husband worked the mines in Virginia City. We had been there for about a year when he got caught in a cave in last month. He didn't make it out." "I'm sorry," Quinton said sincerely. She nodded, acknowledging his sympathy. "After he died, I found out that we owed more debts than I knew about. He had been gambling, trying to win enough to get us out of Virginia City to buy some land somewhere. Instead, he just dug us deeper into a hole. The landlord took everything we had for back rent, and the men he owed money to. Well, they weren't patient about collecting." Her hand trembled slightly as she set down her spoon. "One of them suggested I could work off the debt in other ways. I didn't wait around to hear the details. I took what I could carry and started walking. I've been moving from town to town, picking up work where I can, but most places don't want to hire a woman alone. Too scandalous, or the wives don't trust me, or the men think I'm offering more than just honest work." Quinton felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of men threatening this woman, of the hardships she had endured. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "Nobody's going to hurt you or pressure you into anything. You can stay as long as you need to figure things out." Nora looked at him with such surprise and relief that it made his heart ache. "Why would you do this for a stranger? You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." "Are you?" he asked simply. "No," she said immediately. "Every word is true, then that's good enough for me. Besides, I could use some help around here. My housekeeper quit 2 months ago to help her daughter with a new baby, and I've been making do on my own. If you're willing to help with the cooking and keeping the house in order, and maybe tend to some of the smaller animals, I'd consider it a fair trade for room and board." It wasn't entirely true. Quinton had been managing just fine on his own, and he had planned to hire one of the women from town eventually. But he could see that Nora needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she was earning her keep rather than accepting charity. It was a matter of pride, and he understood that. "I can do all of that," Nora said, sitting up straighter. "I'm a hard worker, Mr. Blake. You won't regret this." "It's Quinton," he corrected, "and I don't think I will." He showed her to the spare room after she finished eating. It was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a handmade quilt, a dresser, a small washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern pasture. Nora stood in the doorway, taking it all in with an expression of wonder. "I'll get you some water so you can wash up," Quinton said. "And I think my sister left some clothes behind when she moved. You're about the same size. I'll leave them outside the door for you." "Thank you," Nora said again, her voice thick with emotion. "Quinton, thank you for this kindness." He nodded, suddenly feeling awkward under the weight of her gratitude. "Get some rest. We can talk more at supper." Over the following days, Nora proved herself to be exactly what she claimed. She rose early each morning and had coffee brewing before Quinton came in from his first round of checking the livestock. She cooked meals that were better than anything he had eaten in months, and she kept the house cleaner than it had been since his mother was alive. More than that, she had a gentle way with the chickens and the milk cow, and even the ranch dogs took to her immediately. Quinton found himself looking forward to mealtimes, when they would sit together and talk. Nora was intelligent and well-read, educated by a schoolteacher mother before her parents had died of cholera when she was 16. She had married her late husband, Thomas, when she was 18, more out of necessity than love, though she spoke of him with kindness. "He wasn't a bad man," she told Quinton one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink. "Just a desperate one. He wanted to give me a good life, and that desperation made him make poor choices." "That doesn't excuse leaving you in danger," Quinton said, his jaw tight. "No," Nora agreed softly. "But I can't change what happened. I can only move forward." As the weeks passed, Quinton became increasingly aware of Nora's presence in ways that went beyond simple gratitude for her help. He noticed the way her hair caught the morning light, the sound of her humming while she worked, the rare, full smile that transformed her entire face when something genuinely delighted her. He found himself making excuses to come back to the house during the day, to check if she needed anything, or to share some small observation about the ranch. Nora, for her part, found herself drawn to Quinton's quiet strength and unexpected kindness. He was nothing like Thomas had been. Where her late husband had been restless and always chasing the next opportunity, Quinton was steady and content with what he had built. He treated her with a respect that she had rarely experienced, asking her opinion on matters around the ranch and listening when she spoke. His rare smiles were genuine, reaching his eyes and making them crinkle at the corners in a way that made her heart skip. One afternoon in early June, Quinton came back to find Nora in the vegetable garden she had started behind the house. She was kneeling in the dirt, her borrowed dress protected by an apron, carefully transplanting seedlings. She looked up at his approach, shielding her eyes from the sun. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the neat rows. "I found some seeds in the pantry, and the growing season isn't too far gone. We should have fresh vegetables by late summer if I tend them properly." "I don't mind at all," Quinton said, crouching down beside her. "My mother used to keep a garden right here. I'm glad to see it being used again." They worked together in companionable silence for a while, Quinton helping her dig holes for the larger plants. Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same seedling, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. They pulled back simultaneously, suddenly awkward. "Sorry," Nora murmured, her cheeks flushing. "No harm done," Quinton replied, but his voice sounded rougher than usual. That night, lying in her bed, Nora stared at the ceiling and acknowledged what she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was falling in love with Quinton Blake. The realization terrified her. She had been in Hamilton for just over a month, and her husband had been dead for barely 2. What kind of woman developed feelings for another man so quickly? Was she dishonoring Thomas's memory? Or had her marriage been so devoid of real love that this was the first time she was experiencing genuine romantic feelings? In his own room down the hall, Quinton was grappling with similar thoughts. He had been attracted to women before, had even courted a girl from town a few years back before she married someone else. But what he felt for Nora was different, deeper. It wasn't just her beauty, though he certainly found her beautiful. It was her resilience, her kindness, the way she had taken the broken pieces of her life and was carefully rebuilding them into something new. He wanted to be part of that rebuilding. He wanted to give her not just a corner of his barn or even a room in his house, but everything he had. The problem was timing. She was still grieving, still recovering from trauma. The last thing he wanted was to pressure her or make her feel obligated to return his feelings because he had helped her. So he kept his emotions locked away, treating her with the same careful respect he had from the beginning, even as it became harder to ignore the way his heart raced when she smiled at him. The turning point came in mid-July. Quinton had gone into Hamilton to pick up supplies, and Nora had stayed behind to finish the week's baking. She was pulling a pie from the oven when she heard horses approaching at speed. Through the window, she saw 3 men riding up to the house, and her blood ran cold. She recognized one of them, a man named Silas who had worked with Thomas in Virginia City. He was one of the men her late husband had owed money to. Fear spiked through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She set the pie on the cooling rack and walked to the door, opening it but staying in the threshold. "Nora Walsh," Silas called out, dismounting. He was a thick-set man with a scarred face and mean eyes. "Been looking for you for months. You owe me money, woman. $200 your husband borrowed and never paid back." "I don't have $200, Nora said, keeping her voice steady. "Thomas left me with nothing but debts. That's why I left Virginia City." "Well, that's too bad for you," Silas said, starting toward the porch. "But I'm sure we can work something out. A woman like you has other ways to settle accounts." "This isn't my property," Nora said quickly. "I'm just the housekeeper here. The owner wouldn't take kindly to you threatening his employee." Silas laughed, a harsh sound. "I don't see nobody else around." "Why don't you invite us in and we can discuss this proper like?" "The lady said this isn't her property." A voice rang out from behind them. Quinton sat on his horse at the edge of the yard, and he wasn't alone. 2 of his ranch hands, both armed and alert, flanked him. "And she's right. I wouldn't take kindly to threats on my land." Quinton dismounted smoothly, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. He hadn't drawn it, but the threat was implicit. His face was harder than Nora had ever seen it, his eyes cold. "This is between me and the woman," Silas said, but his confidence had wavered. "Her husband owed me money." "Her late husband," Quinton corrected, "and debt doesn't transfer to a widow unless she signed the contract herself. Did you sign anything, Nora?" "No," she said, relief flooding through her at his presence. "Then you don't owe these men anything," Quinton said. He turned his attention back to Silas. "And even if she did, you'd be collecting through proper legal channels, not showing up at a private residence making threats. So here's how this is going to go. You're going to get back on your horses and ride out of here. If I see you near Miss Walsh or my property again, I'll involve the sheriff, and we'll have a conversation about attempted extortion and intimidation." Silas glared at him, clearly weighing his options. Quinton stood his ground, his ranch hands ready to back him up. Finally, Silas spat in the dirt and jerked his head at his companions. "This isn't over," he said to Nora. "Yeah, it is," Quinton replied flatly. "Because if it's not, you'll have a lot more to worry about than $200. Now get off my land." The 3 men mounted up and rode off, their departure lacking the bravado of their arrival. Quinton watched until they were out of sight, then turned to his ranch hands. "Keep an eye out for the next few days. If they come back, one of you ride for the sheriff while the other comes to get me." The men nodded and headed back to their work. Quinton climbed the porch steps to where Nora still stood, her face pale but composed. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. The concern in his voice, the protective fury that still simmered in his eyes, broke through the composure she had been clinging to. Nora felt tears spill over, and before she could stop herself, she stepped forward into Quinton's arms. He held her without hesitation, one hand cradling her head against his chest while the other wrapped around her waist. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I promise you're safe here." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I'm sorry I brought trouble to your door." "You didn't bring anything but light to my home," Quinton said fiercely. "Those men and their threats are not your fault. Your husband's debts are not your burden to carry." They stood like that for a long moment, and when Nora finally pulled back, Quinton reluctantly let her go. She wiped her eyes, offering him a shaky smile. Thank you. Again. I seem to be thanking you constantly. You don't have to thank me for doing what's right, he said, but his eyes held something more than just righteousness. There was a tenderness there that made Nora's breath catch. That evening they sat on the porch as had become their custom, but the air between them felt different, charged with an awareness that neither could ignore any longer. Quinton broke the silence first. Nora, I need to be honest with you about something. She turned to look at him, her heart beginning to race. What is it? He met her gaze directly, his expression serious. When you first came here asking for a corner of my barn, I gave you the house because it was the decent thing to do. You needed help, and I was in a position to offer it. But over these past months, my reasons for wanting you to stay have changed. Nora's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Changed how? I care about you, Quinton said simply. More than I should, probably, given the circumstances. I know you're still grieving Thomas, and I know you're still finding your feet after everything you've been through. I'm not telling you this to pressure you or to make you feel obligated to me. After today, after seeing you threatened, I realized I couldn't keep pretending what I feel is just concern for a friend or an employee. Nora's heart thundered in her chest. Quinton, let me finish, he said gently. You don't have to say anything back. Your place here is secure no matter what. I want you to know that. Whether you share my feelings or not, you have a home here for as long as you want it. I just couldn't keep this to myself anymore and be honest with you. The vulnerability in his voice, the careful way he was giving her every assurance and asking for nothing in return, made Nora's decision easy. She reached over and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I was worried I was betraying Thomas's memory, she admitted quietly. He's only been gone a few months, and here I am developing feelings for another man. But the truth is, Quinton, what I feel for you is something I never felt in my marriage. Thomas and I cared for each other, but it was never this. This feeling like my heart is going to burst whenever you smile at me. This certainty that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be when I'm near you. Quinton squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with hope. You mean that? Every word, she said, smiling through the tears that gathered in her eyes. You gave me so much more than shelter, Quinton. You gave me back my life, my hope. You made me feel valued and safe and cared for. How could I not love you for that? How could I not love you for who you are, the kind and strong and wonderful man that you are? He stood, pulling her gently to her feet and cupped her face in his calloused hands. Can I kiss you, please? She whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking the fragile magic of the moment. But then Nora's arms wrapped around his neck, and Quinton pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of all the longing and hope they had both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Nora Walsh, he said, and I want to marry you if you'll have me, not right away if you need time, but someday. I want you to be my wife, to build a real life together. Yes, Nora said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. I don't need time to know that you're what I've been searching for my whole life without even knowing it. They were married 6 weeks later in Hamilton's small church, with the whole town in attendance. Nora wore a dress that Quinton had bought for her from the finest shop in town, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored silk that made her eyes shine like emeralds. Quinton wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking more nervous than Nora had ever seen him. The local minister, Reverend Matthews, conducted the ceremony with warmth and genuine happiness for the couple. When Quinton slipped the gold band onto Nora's finger, his hand trembled slightly, and when she did the same for him, her voice was thick with emotion as she repeated her vows. I, Nora, take you, Quinton, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The kiss that sealed their marriage was met with applause and cheers from the gathered townspeople, many of whom had come to know and respect both Quinton and Nora over the years. A celebration followed at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard laden with food that friends and neighbors had contributed. There was music and dancing, and Nora found herself swept from partner to partner until Quinton finally claimed her again, pulling her close for a slow waltz as the sun began to set. "Happy, Mrs. Blake," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, tilting her head back to look at him. "When I stumbled onto your property asking for a corner of a barn, I never imagined I'd end up with all of this. A home, a husband who loves me, a real future." "You deserve all of it and more," Quinton said, spinning her gently. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how precious you are to me." That night, after the guests had departed and the ranch had settled into peaceful quiet, Quinton carried Nora over the threshold of their home. Their home, not just his anymore. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the room that had been his but was now decorated with touches of her personality, her belongings mingling with his in a way that felt perfectly natural. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Nora shook her head. "Not with you. Never with you." Their wedding night was everything their first kiss had promised, tender and passionate, a physical expression of the love and trust they had built over the months. Afterward, lying in Quinton's arms with her head resting on his chest, Nora felt a peace settle over her that she had never known before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Quinton replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Forever." The following months saw them settle into married life with an ease that spoke to how well matched they were. Nora continued to tend the house and garden, but now as the ranch owner's wife rather than the housekeeper. She also became more involved in the ranch operations, her sharp mind and organizational skills proving invaluable when it came to managing the books and planning for the future. Quinton, for his part, had never been happier. Coming home to Nora's smile, sharing meals and conversation, and the simple domestic pleasures of married life, made all his years of hard work and solitude feel worthwhile. She challenged him intellectually, supported him emotionally, and loved him with a wholehearted devotion that still sometimes took his breath away. In the spring of 1879, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinton one evening after supper, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said, her eyes shining with joy and a hint of nervousness. Quinton's face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, and then pure elation. He let out a whoop of joy and swept Nora into his arms, spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "Are you sure? Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should we get the doctor?" Nora laughed at his sudden flurry of concern. "I'm fine. I'm healthy and strong, and the baby won't come until the fall. We have plenty of time to prepare." "A baby," Quinton repeated, the wonder in his voice making Nora's heart swell. "We're going to be parents." He was attentive to the point of being overprotective during her pregnancy, constantly worrying about whether she was doing too much or needed more rest. Nora bore his hovering with patient amusement, touched by how much he cared even when she had to shoo him away so she could continue her daily tasks. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him gently when he tried to insist she stop working in the garden. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I promise I'll be careful and rest when I need to." The baby, a boy they named Thomas Quinton Blake in honor of Nora's late first husband and his father, arrived on a crisp October morning. The birth was long and difficult, and Quinton paced outside the bedroom door for hours while the midwife and the doctor attended to Nora. When he finally heard his son's cry, followed by the doctor's assurance that both mother and baby were healthy, he nearly collapsed with relief. Nora was exhausted but radiant when he entered the room, cradling their newborn son against her chest. The baby had dark hair like both his parents and Quinton's golden brown eyes. "Come meet your son," Nora said softly. Quinton approached slowly, almost reverently, and when Nora placed the baby in his arms, he felt his entire world shift. This tiny person, his son, depending on him for everything. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was the love that flooded through him. "He's perfect," Quinton whispered, unable to look away from the baby's face. "You're perfect. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Nora said, reaching up to touch Quinton's cheek. "He's ours, the first piece of the family we're building." Little Thomas, who they called Tommy, was a healthy, happy baby who brought even more joy to the Blake household. Quinton proved to be a devoted father, taking on his share of the late-night feedings and diaper changes without complaint. He would sit in the rocking chair by the nursery window, holding his son and telling him stories about the ranch, about his grandparents, about the future that awaited him. Nora would sometimes stand in the doorway watching them, her heart so full of love it felt like it might overflow. This was everything she had never dared to dream of when she stumbled onto Quinton's property nearly 2 years ago. A husband who cherished her, a beautiful child, a home that felt safe and warm and full of love. When Tommy was 6 months old, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This time the announcement was met with equal joy but less panic from Quinton, who had gained confidence as a father and husband. "I know what to expect this time," he said, grinning as he pulled Nora into his arms. "Though I'm still going to worry about you constantly." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Nora teased, kissing him soundly. Their daughter, Elizabeth Grace Blake, called Lizzie, was born in the summer of 1881. Her birth was easier than Tommy's had been, and she came into the world with a full head of red gold hair that surprised everyone, given both her parents had dark hair. The doctor suggested she must have inherited it from a grandparent, and Nora remembered that her mother had indeed had auburn hair. "She's going to be a beauty," Quinton said, enchanted by his tiny daughter. "I'm going to have to beat the boys off with a stick when she grows up." "That's at least 15 years away," Nora said, laughing. "Let's just enjoy her being a baby for now." With 2 young children, the Blake household was busy and often chaotic, but it was a happy chaos. Tommy was a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, and Lizzie was a cheerful baby who seemed to smile at everyone. Quinton expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen to accommodate their growing family. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Quinton made smart decisions about livestock and land use, while Nora handled the financial side with a skill that impressed even the bank manager in Hamilton. They became well-respected members of the community, known for their fairness in business dealings and their generosity to those in need. One afternoon in the fall of 1882, a young woman appeared at their door, much as Nora had done years before. She was thin and scared, fleeing from a bad situation in a neighboring town. Nora took one look at her and saw herself, saw the desperation and the fragile hope that someone might help. "Come in," she said immediately, ushering the girl inside. "You're safe here." Quinton, coming in from the barn and seeing the situation, caught Nora's eye and gave her a subtle nod of approval. They found the girl, whose name was Sarah, a position in town working for the seamstress, a kind widow who needed an apprentice. They paid for her room and board until she got her first wages, and they checked in on her regularly to make sure she was settling in well. "You didn't have to do that," Sarah said tearfully when she thanked them. "I was just hoping for a meal and maybe a place to sleep for a night. Someone once showed me extraordinary kindness when I needed it most," Nora said, glancing at Quinton with a soft smile. "We're just passing that kindness forward." As the years passed, Tommy and Lizzie grew into bright, lively children who were the center of their parents' world. Tommy showed an early aptitude for working with the ranch animals, especially the horses, and Quinton began teaching him the skills he would need to eventually run the ranch himself. Lizzie was more interested in books and learning, and Nora spent happy hours teaching her to read and work with numbers. In 1885, Nora gave birth to their third and final child, another boy they named Samuel James Blake, called Sam. His arrival completed their family in a way that felt perfect and right. 3 healthy, happy children, a thriving ranch, and a love that had only grown stronger and deeper with time. One evening, when Sam was about a year old and the other children were already in bed, Quinton and Nora sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. Quinton had his arm around Nora's shoulders, and she leaned into him contentedly. "Do you ever think about that day you first came here?" Quinton asked. "When you asked for a corner of the barn?" Nora laughed softly. "I think about it all the time. I was so scared and so desperate, and I truly thought if I could just find a dry place to sleep, that would be enough. I never imagined you would give me so much more." "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you," Quinton admitted. "You were standing at my gate with your chin up despite everything you had been through, and I knew my life was about to change. I just didn't know how much, or how grateful I would be for that change every single day." "I love you," Nora said, tilting her head up to kiss him. "Thank you for seeing past my desperation to the person I was underneath. Thank you for giving me not just shelter but a home. Not just kindness but love. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Quinton corrected. "My life before you was fine, but it was empty. You filled all those empty spaces with light and love and purpose. Our children, this family we have built, it's the best thing I have ever done or ever will do." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the Nevada night, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the grass, the soft nickering of horses in the barn. Inside the house, their children slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams young children have. Everything they had built together, every moment of joy and struggle and love, had led to this perfect peace. Years continued to pass, and the Blake family remained strong. Tommy grew into a young man who was the image of his father, tall and strong and steady, with Quinton's work ethic and Nora's sharp mind. He took on more responsibility at the ranch, and Quinton began to step back slightly, content to let his son learn through experience. Lizzie, true to her early interests, became quite the scholar. Nora taught her everything she could, and when that wasn't enough, they arranged for a tutor from Hamilton to come twice a week. Lizzie talked about becoming a teacher herself one day, and both her parents encouraged her ambitions even though it was still unusual for women to pursue careers in 1890. Sam, the youngest, was a perfect blend of both his siblings. He loved the ranch work like Tommy, but also shared Lizzie's love of learning. He was also the family peacemaker, able to smooth over any disagreement between his older siblings with humor and charm. In the summer of 1892, Tommy, now 13, asked his father if he could start training one of the new colts. Quinton agreed, and father and son spent long hours working together. Quinton teaching Tommy the patient, gentle methods he had learned from his own father. "You have a real gift with horses," Quinton told his son one afternoon as they watched the young colt respond to Tommy's training. "Your grandfather would have been proud of you." "Tell me about him again," Tommy said, "and about grandmother." Quinton settled against the fence and began recounting stories of his parents, of building the ranch from almost nothing, of the hard years and the good ones. Tommy listened intently, hungry for connection to the grandparents he had never known. "They would have loved you," Quinton finished. "All three of you kids. They always wanted this house to be full of family and love, and your mother and I have made sure their wish came true." That evening at dinner, with the whole family gathered around the table, Quinton looked at each face illuminated by the lamplight and felt overwhelming gratitude. Nora, still as beautiful to him as the day they married, her dark hair now showing just a few threads of silver at the temples. Tommy, growing so fast into manhood. Lizzie, sharp and curious, always asking questions. Sam, cheerful and affectionate, the baby of the family though not really a baby anymore at 7 years old. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked, catching his gaze and smiling. "Just counting my blessings," Quinton replied. He raised his glass of water. "To family, to love, to the life we have built together. To family," everyone echoed, glasses clinking together. After the children had gone to bed, Quinton and Nora prepared for sleep in their own room. It was a comfortable routine built over years of marriage, moving around each other with the ease of long familiarity. When they finally settled into bed, Nora curled against Quinton's side, her head on his shoulder. "We have done well, haven't we?" she murmured. "With the children, with the ranch, with everything. We have done more than well," Quinton said, his arms tightening around her. "We have built something real and lasting and good. Our children are healthy and happy and growing into fine people. The ranch is secure. And we still love each other as much as we did the day we married, maybe even more." "Definitely more," Nora said. "I didn't think it was possible to love someone more than I loved you on our wedding day, but every year, every moment we share, my love grows deeper." "Mine too," Quinton whispered, kissing her forehead. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Nora Blake." As the 1890s progressed, the Blake family continued to thrive. The ranch remained profitable even as the West became less wild, as towns grew larger and more settled, as the frontier era slowly gave way to a more modern age. Hamilton itself had grown from a rough mining town into a proper community with schools and churches, and even a small library that Lizzie visited regularly. In 1895, when Tommy was 16, a young woman named Catherine moved to Hamilton with her family. She was sweet and pretty, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and Tommy was immediately smitten. Nora watched her son fall in love with the same helpless intensity she had seen in Quinton all those years ago, and she felt both joy and the bittersweet knowledge that her children were growing up, starting to build lives of their own. "Should I be worried?" Quinton asked one evening, watching Tommy ride off to call on Catherine. "Only in the way all fathers worry about their sons," Nora said, patting his arm. "Catherine is a good girl from a good family, and Tommy is responsible and respectful. Let him have his romance." "He's so young," Quinton protested, though he knew he was being somewhat hypocritical given that he had been only a few years older when he fell for Nora. "First love doesn't always last," Nora said gently, "but it teaches us how to love. And if it does last, well, then we will welcome Catherine into our family with open arms." As it turned out, Tommy and Catherine's love did last. They courted properly for 2 years, and when Tommy was 18 and Catherine 17, he asked Quinton's permission to marry her. Quinton gave it, though not without some fatherly concern about their youth. The wedding was held at the Blake Ranch in the spring of 1897, a joyful celebration that reminded Quinton and Nora of their own wedding nearly 19 years earlier. Catherine moved into the ranch house, and plans were made to eventually build a separate house on the property for the young couple, so they could have their own space while still being part of the family operation. Watching Tommy pledge his love to Catherine, Nora reached for Quinton's hand, squeezing it gently. He squeezed back, understanding without words what she was feeling. Pride in their son, happiness for his future, and a touch of melancholy that the little boy they had rocked to sleep was now a man starting his own family. A year later, in 1898, Catherine gave birth to Quinton and Nora's first grandchild, a girl they named Rose. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Quinton felt tears prick his eyes. The circle of life continuing, new generations carrying forward the legacy he and Nora had built. "You are going to spoil her absolutely rotten," Nora predicted, watching her husband coo at the baby. "That's what grandparents are for," Quinton replied without a hint of shame. Lizzie, now 17, showed no signs of settling down romantically, much to the disappointment of several young men in Hamilton who had tried to court her. She was focused on her education and her plans to become a teacher. Nora supported her fully, even when some of the more traditional townspeople suggested it was time for Lizzie to marry. "She will marry when and if she chooses," Nora said firmly to one particularly persistent busybody. "My daughter has a mind of her own, and I am proud of her for it." Sam, at 13, was showing signs of being as girl-crazy as his brother had been, though none of his crushes seemed to stick. He was also proving to be an excellent horseman, and was talking about maybe becoming a horse trainer or even breeding horses specifically for ranch work. As the new century dawned in 1900, the Blake family gathered to celebrate not just the new year but the new century. Quinton, now 48, and Nora, 44, looked around at their assembled family with deep satisfaction. Tommy and Catherine with little Rose, now a toddler. Lizzie, preparing to start her teaching position at the Hamilton School in the fall. Sam, still at home and full of enthusiasm for everything life had to offer. 22 years ago," Quinton said, raising his glass in a toast, "a woman came to my door asking for a corner of my barn. I gave her my house instead, and she gave me the world. Everything good in my life stems from that moment, from the decision to open my door and my heart. To Nora, the love of my life and the foundation of everything we have built, and to family, the greatest blessing of all." To Nora, everyone echoed. To family. Nora, her eyes bright with tears, stood and kissed her husband soundly, to the amused applause of their children. "And to you, Quinton Blake, the man who saved my life and then made it worth living." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges, as all lives do. In 1902, Lizzie met a young banker from Carson City who had come to Hamilton on business. His name was William Porter, and he was educated and ambitious, but also kind and respectful of Lizzie's intelligence and independence. They courted for a year before marrying in 1903, and Lizzie moved to Carson City, where she continued teaching at a school for girls while William advanced in his career. Sam, meanwhile, had indeed pursued his interest in horse breeding and had developed a real talent for it. By 1905, at age 20, he was managing that aspect of the ranch and had begun to build a reputation throughout Nevada for producing quality horses. He had also finally settled his romantic interests on a girl named Anna, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they married in the spring of 1906. Quinton and Nora, now in their 50s, gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, though they remained active and involved. Tommy had fully taken over as the primary manager, with Sam handling the horse breeding operation and both sons working together seamlessly. The ranch house, which Quinton had expanded several times over the years, now served as the center of a sprawling family compound. Tommy and Catherine had moved into their own house on the property after their second child was born, and Sam and Anna were building a similar structure. But everyone still gathered at the main house for Sunday dinners and holidays, keeping the family close-knit. On a warm evening in June 1908, Quinton and Nora sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained for 30 years. They were older now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the years of hard work and laughter and love. But they still held hands as they watched the sunset, still found comfort and joy in each other's presence. "You remember what you said to me the night we first admitted our feelings?" Nora asked. "You said you fell in love with me the moment you saw me at your gate." "I remember," Quinton said. "Every word of that conversation is etched in my memory." "I think I fell in love with you then too," Nora said softly. "I just didn't recognize it for what it was. I thought it was gratitude or relief or simple attraction. But looking back, I think my heart knew before my mind did that you were going to be my everything." "You are still my everything," Quinton said, bringing her hand to his lips. "After all these years, all these changes, you are still the first thought in my morning and my last thought at night." "We have had a good life, haven't we?" Nora asked, though it was more statement than question. "The best life," Quinton confirmed. "We have raised 3 wonderful children who have become fine adults. We have grandchildren who will carry our legacy forward. We have built something that will last long after we're gone. And through it all, we have had each other. What more could anyone ask for?" That autumn, Quinton fell ill with pneumonia. It was not uncommon for men his age, especially those who had spent their lives working outdoors in all weather. Nora nursed him with fierce determination, refusing to lose him, refusing to imagine her life without him. The doctor came regularly, and their children took turns sitting with their father, but it was Nora who was by his side day and night. After 2 weeks that felt like 2 years, Quinton's fever finally broke. He woke weak and exhausted but clearly on the mend. The first thing he saw was Nora, slumped in the chair beside his bed, asleep from exhaustion. Even in sleep her hand clutched his as if afraid to let go. "Nora," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. Her eyes flew open immediately, and when she saw him awake and lucid, she burst into tears. "Thank God," she sobbed, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "Thank God you came back to me." "Did you think I would leave you?" Quinton asked, managing a weak smile. "I promised you forever, and I meant it." "Do not scare me like that again," Nora said fiercely, kissing his forehead, his cheeks, his lips. "I cannot lose you, Quinton Blake. I will not lose you." "You won't," he promised. "Not for a long time yet. We still have years ahead of us, my love." And they did. Quinton recovered fully, though the illness left him frailer than before, and he finally had to accept that his days of heavy ranch work were truly behind him. But he found contentment in his new role as advisor and grandfather, spending his days teaching his grandchildren about the land and the horses, passing down the knowledge his own father had given him. By 1915, Quinton and Nora had 7 grandchildren, with another on the way. Rose, Tommy and Catherine's eldest, was already 17 and being courted by a nice young man from town. The ranch had grown and evolved but remained in the family, a testament to the foundation Quinton had built and that he and Nora had strengthened together. One spring morning, Nora found Quinton standing at the gate where she had first appeared 37 years earlier. She walked out to join him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About that day," Quinton said. about how different my life would have been if you had not come down this road, about how a single moment, a single decision to help someone in need, changed everything. It changed everything for me too, Nora said. I asked for so little. Just a corner of a barn, just a bit of shelter from the storm, and you gave me a palace instead. Quinton laughed. I would hardly call our house a palace. Not the physical house, Nora said, turning to face him. Though you did give me that too, but you gave me so much more. You gave me safety when I had none. Love when I thought I would never feel it. A family when I was utterly alone. Children and grandchildren and a life so full and rich that sometimes I can hardly believe it is real. You gave me everything, Quinton. Everything that matters. We gave it to each other, Quinton said, echoing what he had told her so many years ago. Every day with you has been a gift, Nora. Every single day. They stood there for a long moment. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built something extraordinary together. Behind them, the ranch bustled with activity, their sons and daughters-in-law and grandchildren going about their daily work. The legacy they had created was alive and thriving, proof that love and hard work and dedication could create something that lasted. As they walked back to the house together, still holding hands after all these years, Nora thought about the frightened, desperate woman she had been when she first stumbled onto this property. She had begged for so little, expected nothing, and received everything. Not because of luck or chance, but because a good man had chosen kindness over suspicion, generosity over self-interest, and love over fear. The years continued to pass peacefully. In 1920, Quinton and Nora celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a couple of great-grandchildren. Quinton was 68 now, moving slower but still sharp of mind and generous of spirit. Nora, at 64, still tended her garden and managed the household, though with more help from her daughters-in-law these days. On a quiet evening in late autumn of 1922, Quinton and Nora sat on their porch wrapped in blankets against the chill. They had been talking about the old days, about all the people they had known and the changes they had seen. Nevada had changed dramatically from the wild frontier they had known in their youth, but in many ways, the land itself remained eternal. I want you to know something, Quinton said suddenly, his voice serious. If I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a single thing. Every choice I made, every moment we shared led to this. To you, to our family, to this life, and I would not trade it for anything. Even the hard times, Nora asked. The struggles and the fears and the losses, even those, Quinton confirmed, because they made the good times sweeter, because they taught us to appreciate what we have, because we faced them together and that made us stronger. I feel the same way, Nora said softly. Though I do wish we had more time, I am not ready to let you go yet. Who says you have to? Quinton asked, his eyes twinkling with the humor that had never quite left him despite his years. I plan to be around to annoy you for quite a while longer. And he was. Quinton lived to see his 70th birthday in 1924, a remarkable age for a man of his generation and profession. The celebration was large and joyous, with what seemed like half of Hamilton turning out to honor the man who had been a pillar of the community for nearly 5 decades. But time, as always, had its way. In the winter of 1925, Quinton passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Nora beside him as she had been for 47 years of marriage. His death was mourned throughout Hamilton and beyond, but his legacy lived on in his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and the ranch that still bore his name. Nora grieved deeply, but found comfort in her family and in the memories of the extraordinary life they had shared. She lived for another 8 years, long enough to see Rose's children grow and to hold her first great-great-grandchild. She remained in the house Quinton had given her, the house that had been their home and the center of their family for nearly half a century. On a warm spring day in 1933, Nora passed away quietly while sitting in her garden, surrounded by the flowers she had planted and tended for so many years. She was 77 years old, and though her children and grandchildren mourned her loss, they took comfort in the knowledge that she was reunited with Quinton, the man she had loved with her whole heart. At her funeral, Tommy, now 54 and the patriarch of the Blake family, spoke of his mother's courage and resilience. He told the story, as she had told it to him, of how she had come to their father's gate asking for a corner of his barn. "My father gave her the house instead," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. "But more than that, he gave her his heart, his name, and his life. And she gave him the same. Together they built something that will endure long after all of us are gone. They built a family founded on love, respect, and unwavering devotion. That is the legacy they leave us, and it is the greatest gift parents could give their children." Nora was buried beside Quinton in the Hamilton Cemetery, their graves marked by a simple stone that bore both their names and a single inscription: "Forever together." The Blake Ranch continued to operate for generations, passed down through the family line as Quinton and Nora had intended. The story of how it all began, of a desperate woman asking for shelter and a generous man offering so much more, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The house itself remained standing, carefully maintained by descendants who understood its significance. The porch where Quinton and Nora had spent countless evenings, the kitchen where they had shared meals and conversations, the bedroom where they had loved and laughed and grown old together, all of it preserved as a reminder of where it all started. Decades later, when the Blake Ranch celebrated its 100th anniversary, dozens of descendants gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. They stood at the gate where Nora had first appeared, and they told the story once more, how she had begged for a corner of a barn, how Quinton had given her the whole house instead, how that single act of generosity and kindness had blossomed into a love that transcended time and created a legacy that endured. In the end, Quinton and Nora's story was not just about survival or even about love, though it was certainly both of those things. It was about the power of kindness in a harsh world, about choosing to give when it would have been easier to turn away. It was about two people who found each other, when they both needed it most, and built something beautiful together from the broken pieces of their past. And on quiet evenings, when the Nevada wind whispered through the ranch that still bore the Blake name, some of the family swore they could feel the presence of those two souls, still together, still watching over the legacy they had created with such love and dedication. The cowboy and the woman he saved, whose love story began with a simple request and became something extraordinary, something that would truly last forever.